Ed Joyce, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
A lot to talk to you about. We're going to do a chat about Irish cricket generally, but the Ashes is very much in the ether. You've been watching your fair share, I suspect.
Yeah, getting up early when I can. I really enjoy getting up in the morning and seeing the contrast with the brightness and the sunshine over there compared to here. So yeah, I've enjoyed watching a good bit of it. It's been an interesting series, very short series so far. Not obviously 2 days for that first game and only 3 in the second. So yeah, lots of work for England to do.
It's your sun lamp, your vitamin D deprived sun lamp in the winter.
This is it. Yeah. So we sit around the breakfast table watching a bit when we can.
Okay. Dad, listen to me. Dad.
Yeah.
In a second, son.
Yeah. We're busy.
Yeah. So as we were just discussing, it has been for England fairly disastrous. Michael Vaughan has used the word humiliation. He reckons it could very easily be 5-0. Third test is upcoming, 16th of December. How would you characterise what's happened across these first 2 tests?
I think humiliation is an overstatement. Personally, I think it's a very, very hard place to tour. I do think England went out there with high hopes, though, and 2-0 they'd be absolutely gutted with that scoreline, considering the first innings in Perth, the way that was going. You know, probably the confidence the team had going out there. They'll be absolutely gutted, and then they've taken a lot of stick after this second game as well. And I think that's with the comms afterwards as well. You know, the things that have been said. This is the way we play. The really positive sort of brand of cricket that they're trying to play, and it does seem to have fallen flat a bit. You know, and this is really the first time I think we've seen Stokes, especially as captain, questioning maybe the mentality of the team a bit and questioning potentially in his own head whether they're going about things the right way. And I think there were bits at the end of that, that second test there where Archer running in and bowling 150 Ks, when the game was gone, I think that didn't look good. Where was that in some of the other innings, albeit he's bowled pretty well in the series. And just the way, a lot of the dismissals, Michael Neser, who's a real medium pacer with the keeper up, and I think, a lot of the comms again from the England camp is that kind of bowling doesn't work in Test cricket, and then he goes in and gets 5 for with the keeper up. So it just looks, it looks like things are going about as badly as they can do. I mean, England are they've got a very, very talented team. So, really hoping they bounce back in the next test to make the series watchable.
So they weren't misguided going out with confidence given the players they have. You mentioned Ben Stokes. What he said after the second test was, there's a saying that we've said a lot here in Australia. It's not for weak men. A dressing room that I'm captain of is not a place for weak men either. It's very disappointing. There's something about the phrase weak men that makes you sit up and take notice.
Yeah, I'm very surprised he used that. I mean, if he's saying weak men to the media, I wonder what he's saying in the change room. That's a big thing to say openly, to go from also backing he's a real backer of his team, his teammates and stuff like that, and to go and then say weak men on camera was an interesting one. So as I said, I think there was probably some harsh words after that.
And not like him
game.
To talk like this.
Very unlike him, and he's very well liked by the team. So that's a big statement.
He doesn't like them.
Yeah, not at the moment. He doesn't know. Well, listen, it's hard. Interestingly, he has been, him and McCullum are the drivers of this way of playing, and it's very much a reflection of their personalities. They're both, they're both sort of. They want to score quickly. They want to be aggressive. They want to be constantly trying to take wickets. This idea of boring teams out and bowling consistently and stuff. They obviously don't like that, But then the way he batted actually in both innings was fairly circumspect, and it looked like he realised that sometimes you need to just hang in, and I think Australia showed them how to do that in their innings in the first innings in Brisbane, where their tail just batted and batted and batted and waited and made sure that they were bowling under the lights with the new pink ball, and that made a big difference. So it's just you can't play just one way all the time, and I think that's what all the journalists and stuff are saying at the moment is you can't play any sport, any top level sport, one way the whole time. You have to be adaptable. You have to, do things differently depending on what's in front of you. And England haven't done that. I think that's been pretty obvious, and it's hurt them.
Yeah. So to chart Bazball, Brendan McCullum, the New Zealander, who's come in as coach and really driven this style, as you said, aggressive. Let's get numbers on the board quickly. Some would say swing wildly, naively. So initially that started in 22 when he came on board, this very aggressive style of batting, which we do see more in one-day cricket, obviously. Now, as I understand it, it made a really positive impact initially, and England had chased down big targets against the likes of New Zealand very successfully. And I remember at the time it being talked about as the new era. I mean, this is just how sport trends. We have three-pointers in basketball. Aggression is where all sport goes. In golf, you hit it further and longer, and that's how you play the sport. This is where cricket is going. And I think the old schoolers were saying, not test cricket, never test cricket. And I suppose this is where the rubber is hitting the road. Because when they played India this year, the tactics were also criticised when England were in a winning position and they lost the final test and drew the series on home soil. So it's not like it has just come unstuck here in Australia. But to your point about the difficulty to go to somewhere like Australia, if this kind of style is going to come unstuck somewhere, then Ashes away, I would think it's nailed on. Have they been horribly naive here? Arrogant?
There's a lot to unpack there. I think the style of cricket is great. I mean, it's very watchable. It really suits the players they're picking. And it also, it's sort of, if you know your captain and your coach are backing you and you want to play a certain way, it has worked. They came in and you mentioned that series against New Zealand. There were some unbelievable chases in that. They played brilliantly against Pakistan away, scoring I think over 500 runs in a day, which is unheard of in a Test match. So I think it's a good premise. I think the whole point that people are trying to make, though, is you cannot do the same thing all the time. Top teams will figure you out. They'll set defensive fields and have very strict plans to try and negate what you're doing. And so you can't do the same thing all the time. And I think England have decided they're just going to play this way regardless of the situation.
They've doubled down.
Yeah, a huge double down. And I think that to me that's the mistake. It's not the brand of cricket they're trying to play. I don't think it's a mistake. I love, Australia do it themselves as well. If they get the opportunity to take you on, they'll try and score 6 and over. And we saw that from Head in the first test. We saw it from them in the second innings here. If you bowl badly at them, they'll smash you around. They're not waiting around, So,
but if you're bowling well,
yeah,
or if conditions favour the bowler,
yeah,
then Australia have the good sense to say now is not the moment.
Yeah, 100%. So they played the situation in front of them. Joe Root did that. Joe Root's the best batsman in the world, in my opinion, no doubt. And
he's walked off with 0 and 8
in the first test, and then he got an amazing 100 in the second test in pretty difficult conditions. So obviously, best batsman in the world can still do badly. The best striker in the world mightn't score a goal, but
if your best batsman is walking off with 0 and 8.
Yeah, but that can happen. It can happen, So it was a very, very tough pitch to bat on in the first game. Now, I would be critical of the shot in the second innings. It wasn't a great shot, and I think there were lots of England batsmen who didn't play very well in that second innings in Perth. But then you saw someone who went to Brisbane. That's very mentally strong to get 2 failures in the first game, lose, then come back and get that 100 in Brisbane. He's an unbelievable player. But he played the situation. He wasn't going out and smashing the ball around. There were none of these ramps, none of the sort of reverse stuff he was doing a couple of years ago in that Ashes series, albeit fairly successfully. But he just played the situation, and there were lots of dismissals around him which weren't like that, So
he did adapt a touch.
Yeah, he adapted. Stokes did adapt as well, and he's a skipper, So I wonder, is the sort of discussion in the change room, play the way you feel like you need to keep going with this super expansive brand if you want to, but I'm gonna, play differently.
And how do you think? I keep going. I'm on the cusp of calling him Baz. I presume.
Yeah.
Brendan McCullum. Are you a football fan?
Yeah, big football fan. Yeah.
Okay. So a reasonable analogy is manager comes in and says we're playing from the back, and I don't care if there's a high press against us. I don't care if you're all marked. Yeah. You play out from the back.
Well, I'm a Spurs fan, so there's a poster
okay
thing. Yeah.
And if we screw up and give away a soft goal, it's on me.
Yeah.
But what's unforgivable is even if your right back is marked, you don't give it to him, you go long, you're out of the team.
Yeah.
Do we understand or know if McCullum is that much of a kind of dedact about it?
I'm a little bit removed being over here, but I still have lots of friends and stuff, and especially in coaching in England. And the impression that they get, I don't know if it's been definitely said, but if you even watch county cricket now, the younger players are playing in a certain way. Now that comes down to them playing a lot of T20 cricket and how important that is. But also, that's the way they feel they get into the Test team, by playing this certain way. And it's been pretty clear that they haven't picked any young batter recently who plays to occupy the crease, rather than score at 6 and over. Anyone who comes in has been, someone who's attacking. Sticking with Crawley, very attacking player. Duckett's very attacking player. Ollie Pope's an attacking player. Jamie Smith, the new keeper, took over from Ben Foakes, who arguably is one of the best keepers in the world and a very good batter, but he's a crease occupier, and they brought in Jamie Smith, who's a hitter. So it seems to be that they're going, this is the way we're going to play. These are the type of cricketers we want, and we're going to bring them in.
But to put it a different way, do you think when Joe Root walked in after playing the conditions a bit more with a lot of runs in his back pocket, I presume McCullum is not saying, Joe, what the hell was that?
No, I don't think he is, and no, he's not. Hubris.
Yeah.
So he's
giving them a
taken
certain
100. Yeah, well,
license.
you can. Joe Root's the best player in the world. It's like, again, it'd be like saying, and I mean this, it'd be like saying to Ronaldo, I want you to do it. He can do it. He can do whatever.
What about someone further down the pecking order? If they went out and they didn't like the feel of this and they played a more conservative brand, do you think McCullum is saying that's not what we're doing?
Well, I think he would have done that before.
Before
now.
Okay.
But as I said, Stokes went out, and if you look at Stokes' strike rate in both innings, it was 50 maybe. But they're talking about having sort of 80 plus. That's the amount of balls you face and how many runs you score for those balls. I think an interesting one would be whether they'd actually, if Joe Root, being a young player now, obviously he's one of the best players in the world, if not the best in my opinion, would they pick him? Would they have picked him as a young player who was that accumulator type player as opposed to the big hitting player?
Yeah.
And would you have ever actually seen one of the best players, one of the best England players ever, if this was the coaching ticket?
Which is quite damning.
Yeah.
I don't know much about cricket, but everything I've read about this just seems like insanity.
Yeah, they're sticking to the guns. The adaptability isn't there, and I think this is the first time they've had people like Michael Vaughan, Kevin Peterson, people like this, Jonathan Agnew, very well-known cricket journalists in England, really question them, and they're going hard at them and I think it's because of the hubris. It's the sort of, we're sticking to this way, this is the right way, and also the stuff they've said in between. It's fairly bad, I mean, I don't know how much you follow this, but they've got a reputation for playing golf. They play golf all the time in between test matches, which is very common, by the way, but they seem to sort of make a point of saying this is what we're going to do.
Michael Vaughan is not like that.
Yeah, Michael Vaughan loves golf. So I think it's just the comms, the sort of very relaxed, super relaxed attitude.
Yeah.
But again, that's the strength, So again, I always say, lots of people say your biggest strength can end up being your biggest weakness. McCullum and Stoke, super relaxed guys, really attacking. They want their players to go out there and express themselves and take chances and all that kind of thing. And it's great. Everything's great until it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So as I said, the adaptability hasn't been there, and I think that's showing up. But do I think Ben Stokes is definitely the right man to captain England? He's an unbelievable cricketer, and Brendan McCullum's a brilliant coach as well. So they're probably learning on the job here as well, and you just hope that sort of message of adaptability comes through.
Very interesting. And I presume old school cricket people who like Test cricket, beads of sweat, one run at a time, patience, that is the art of Test match cricket. I would think out there's a degree of schadenfreude and people delighted to see that you thought you knew better than 150 years. You didn't.
Yeah, well, there's definitely that. There's 100% that. I mean, Jeff Boycott's a good example. Jeff Boycott personifies going in and trying to bat for a long time, 300 balls, get 100, wear the opposition down. But that is Test cricket, and I think that's where the Bazball thing falls down a bit. Is a good example would be that Brisbane first innings for England. They just needed to wear down the opposition, because if you keep an opposition out in the field for 100, 120, 140 overs in the first innings, especially when they don't pick a spinner, which Australia didn't pick in Nathan Lyon in that Brisbane test, it means all those bowlers have all bowled 25, 30 overs already. So they're knackered. Yeah. No matter how fit, and they've been out in the field for a day and a half in that heat, having bowled 25, 30 overs. and then they go in, they might be batting, they might have to bat themselves, and then they've got to come out and do it again. And then, yes, they'll be fine for 10, 12, 15 over second innings, but then the fatigue sets in. So it is, you've got to bring those games to 5 days if you can, and all they've done is played into Australia's hands, because Mitchell Starc is taking a load of wickets. He's someone who runs in balls 150 clicks. That's bloody hard to do, and
to sustain that for
5 Test matches.
They can't do that.
No, he can't do that. But he's only had to do it for 5 days over 2 Test matches, and they probably would have had in their head that Starc might only play 3 or 4 of the Test matches. Now they're looking at it going and Hazelwood's out as well, one of their other big bowlers. So they're probably looking at it going, he could probably play all 5 now.
So they were taking on Usain Bolt, and he gave them the option of 100 metres or 1,500 metres, and they said, let's go 100.
Yeah, exactly that. So it's probably a better one would probably be a 400 metre or 400 metre. Something that he could have worked. Listen, they could have won in Perth. They batted really badly in that second innings, but they started brilliantly, and the bowling attack did really well. But that Brisbane Test was a bad one. Yeah.
Have many other Test nations looked at Bazball over the last couple of years and adopted it, or are England a little bit out on their own here?
They're out on their own in terms of being so vocal about this is the way we're going to play, and everybody we're telling you this is what we're going to do. They're out on their own there. I think generally speaking, the strike rates and the runs per over and the pace at which the game is moving has increased, and that's because of the T20 cricket, T10 cricket. Young players now the first thing they learn is how to hit 4, 6, stuff like that. Whereas when I was a youngster, it was how to keep the ball, defend your wicket. That was the defend your wicket. So generally speaking, it has increased a lot. But when you get to Test matches, all the other teams are adapting. I mean, England are an incredibly talented team. They're unbelievable players, so they will win a lot playing this way. But they're judged by how they do against India and Australia. They're the two other huge cricketing nations, So, and that hasn't gone particularly well recently.
Do you think 5-0?
If I was a betting man, which I'm not, but if I was a betting man, I would. It's hard to go against it because
think of all those weak men in that.
There's a couple. I don't think there's weak men in there. I think there's. It's very hard. It's hard to describe an Ashes tour, a long tour like that. They're away for 2 or 3 months, and if things start on a slide, it's very hard to drag it back. You're away. You're in a hotel. The media and the public are on you the whole time. Even if they, take a bit of time off, go and play golf or whatever it is, go to a new city and stuff like that. It's just relentless. It's very hard to come back from it. Do I think 5-0? Yeah, I hope not, because I want it to be a very watchable series. But it's hard to see. I mean, Cummins is coming back. The Aussie captain is unbelievable cricketer and probably their best cricketer, and he hasn't played either of the first 2 Test matches. He's going to be back. And Nathan Lyon will come back in, and he's one of the best spin bowlers in the world as well. So, listen, I think it's going to be tough. What I would say is that England have very good players.
Okay,
they have very good players, and if things, go their way, but I think it's going to be tough.
I suppose a strength and a weakness of something like Bazball is momentum.
Yeah,
and when it's with you, oh my God.
Yeah,
but it's probably when it's against you. It's an all or nothing kind of thing. That's
it is a bit all or nothing. I mean, the sort of things people say about going to Australia, you've got to be brave, you've got to be bold, you've got to take them on at their own game. And Australia were the original team who tried to score a 3.5, 4 and over, which doesn't sound very much now, but in Test match terms, that was quite a lot back in the sort of 90s, 2000s and stuff like that.
They were aggressive.
They were aggressive, and Australian men have that.
No weak men there.
No weak men there. Well, that's their mantra or whatever. Yeah. So you've got to sort of take them on at their own game. And in 2005, England's team went out there. They picked 4 big fast bowlers. They picked an aggressive batting lineup, and they went at it, and they won that series. So it did give them a bit of a template. But then there's still a place for Alistair Cook. Going to Australia, he scored over 700 runs in one series, and he's certainly not someone who. And again, he's someone who probably wouldn't get into this. Wouldn't have been picked in this Bazball team because he doesn't play that way.
Yeah.
And the 2 best players of the last 20 years for England, Joe Root, Alistair Cook, would they have even got a chance in this team? So
it's very interesting
to start. So, yeah, listen, it's always fascinating. You're right though. The momentum thing is huge. I think if England sort of won the toss at Adelaide and got going, there's nothing stopping them get a big score.
Yeah.
And then there are huge vulnerabilities in that Australian batting lineup. It's not the Langer, Hayden, Ricky Ponting, that team. They have a couple of brilliant players, but
They're not vintage.
they're not vintage.
Yeah.
So you get a big score on the board. But I worry if Australia bat first in the next game or win the toss and bat first, I think it's going to be really hard because Adelaide's a nice place to bat, and England spend an hour, a day and a half, 2 days out in the field. I think it's going to be very tough.
Well, the first test only lasted 2 days, shortest test since 1921. So there are several records being broken at the moment. You were part of the England Ashes squad 06-07 in Australia. So just in case you think Ed's here sitting here like he knows it all, right? well, what we would have done in 07 is this.
I know what it's like to lose 5-0. That is, but I didn't play any games.
No.
So that's
no blood on your hands.
No blood. Well, yeah. It was,
but you were out there and you were part of the squad. Didn't get on, but England lost 5-0.
Yeah.
So you know what it's like to be part of an Ashes squad. Perth, the Gabba, Melbourne, Sydney, New Year's Eve, all these traditions. It's just one of these sporting things that has kind of by osmosis people are very aware of. But you know what it's like when you're shipping water left, right and centre and it's intense and miserable. So give us a flavour of England 5-0 defeat 06-07 Ashes and what it was like out there.
Well, that came after the 2005 Ashes, which England won at home, and an unbelievable series. It really got the public there. It was absolutely huge.
Well, that was for younger listeners like Parade, Freddie Flintoff,
Meet the Prime Minister, all that stuff.
And they were all in good spirits. Meeting the Prime Minister. The party had continued, but it captured the imagination of the entire country in a massive way.
Yeah, it really, really did, and it made some people superstars, for Flintoff being the obvious example, but, there was so many, Trescothick and Harmison, Simon Jones, and these guys, it was fast ball. There were a lot of fast bowling, a lot of aggressive cricket, huge, packed stadia, and huge public interest. It was also screened on Channel 4, which was a huge thing. It was on free-to-air TV, and they did a brilliant job with it. It was kind of a new way of watching cricket. So it was an enormous series, and then because England won that next series, which was pretty soon afterwards, obviously ended 2006. Only 18 months later, it was the build up to it in Australia was absolutely huge because they won it back. Very similar, they had the same team. They had Glenn McGrath, Shane Warne, Ricky Ponting, all these guys. So, and then the very first ball, I don't know how aware of cricket are, the very first ball of the series, Steve Harmison bowled an enormous wide. He missed the pitch and it went straight to Flintoff at second slip. And it was the biggest letdown of a first ball ever. Everyone, he sprinted in and bowled this, to be like, I don't know, be like someone taking a penalty and hitting it out of the stadium, not even close to the goal. So, it was a bit of a deflating one, and England got absolutely hammered in that. And I ran a lot of drinks that series. I never really felt like I was actually going to play, even though the team were losing so many games.
What age were you then?
I would have been 27.
Okay.
Yeah, 27. Maybe 28. I was 28. So I was 28. Yeah. So I played a lot of county cricket at that stage, but I'd only just qualified to play for England because of residency stuff. So. And I only was out in the series because Marcus Trescothick, who was one of England's big players, came home with some issues. So yeah, I ended up getting called up late. So I joined the squad late, just before that first match in Brisbane. So listen, I had a front row seat for all of those test matches. I did a lot of fielding, 12-man fielding, because people coming on and off and stuff like that. And there were 3 or 4 of us who didn't play a game there. So yeah. An incredible place to tour. It's an amazing country, but as I said, the first test there was in Brisbane. So the first test in this one was in Perth. Second test so they've changed it around. The second test was always Adelaide, and England were in an amazing position in Adelaide in that 06-07 and managed to lose the game somehow. It was one of Shane Warne's big games, and then 2-0 down. Very hard to come back from that.
Okay. And is that at 2-0 into 3-0, is that when things just are very hard to hold together in terms of team spirit and morale?
Yeah. Well, the 06-07, definitely that second test was the big one, because at the very least England looked like getting a draw. I think I got 500 and I can't remember, 550 I think on the board in the first innings. And Australia were in a bit of trouble. I think they were 60 for 3 or something like that. So from that position, you think England win is probably more likely than not, but at the very least a draw, and you sort of, you move on to the next test. Because Adelaide can be very flat, so it can be a hard place to bowl a team out twice, which you need to do in a test match. So, and then you move on, So, and then Perth was traditionally the third test, and by the time we got to Perth, it was very hard because massive body blow that second test. But I do think, as I said, this team, Duncan Fletcher was the head coach at the time, and he was coming to the end of his reign, and I think there was a lot of weariness there. A huge amount of work had gone into getting the team to the point of winning the 2005 Ashes. A lot of stuff had happened before, and I think he was on the way out a little bit. Michael Vaughan was a bit injured as captain. He had a bad knee. So Flintoff came in, and he found it very hard to a very hard place to captain for one of your first time. I think it might have been his first place. So I do know what it feels like. Admittedly, I don't know what it feels like to walk out on the field and actually, try and perform in those circumstances in a test match. Yes, in one-day cricket, but not in a test match for England. But I can know what it's like to be in that dressing room. It's very tough.
And did the dressing room unravel? Did it get?
No, it didn't unravel. There was no unraveling. Everyone stuck very close. You have to, cricketers are used to, if you play at that level, you're used to touring and being away and being in hotels and stuff like that. And ECB, the England Cricket Board, are very good at, families were out. Like my wife was out. She wasn't my wife at the time, but my girlfriend was out there, and lots of families were out there. So there was a bit of, you do get a bit of downtime and stuff. But as I said, that sort of relentless, and you get to the point maybe when you get to the fourth and fifth test where, some of the players are like, there's a lot of scars there. Going out and playing is hard. Yeah. So I'd be very interested to see this next test, but a huge amount lies. I think England are going to struggle to draw any games unless there's rain, because the way they play.
Yeah, all or nothing.
It's all or nothing. But that is, I think, the only way to coming back now.
Just go for it.
They've got to go for it. Yeah, because
Baz says, guys, I've got a plan. We're going to go for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But at least it's clear. I think, the very worst thing they could do now is go into their shells.
Yeah.
Everyone goes adaptable. I think if you're going to be adaptable and play a certain, look at the conditions and play a certain way, you have to do that before the series. You have to go, okay, well, they went in there. They've almost got to double down now, in my opinion. What do you really want to see guys going in and trying to bat for 300 balls? It's not going to happen. Yeah, Joe Root can. Maybe Ollie Pope if they stick with him, although you might get left out. But they've got a couple of guys who can occupy the crease, but the rest of the guys have just got to go out there and still play. And
a last one on just 06-07. What's the most intimidating of those stadiums, or is it all?
Brisbane's often, that traditionally went to that was the first place, and just the crowd is, it's loud, and they're quite aggressive and stuff like that. So they call it the Abbotstown. It's a hard place to win. It's also very alien conditions to what English county cricketers would get usually in terms of the pitch. It's bouncy. It can be hard work. And it just plays very, very differently. So, I try and liken it to maybe the rugby team going and playing in Johannesburg on the Highveld. That it's a tough place to play the first game, but they did that in Perth this year. Perth and Brisbane are the two really alien conditions in terms of those bouncy pitches and stuff like that. So, probably Brisbane.
And is the relationship between the two teams, is it full on traditional sledging as we would know it, or is it a bit more collegiate? Or
the players know each other far better now than they ever did because of the whole T20 franchise circuit that is there now. I mean, there's basically a T20 league in every single country that there is, and they often play together, so they would know each other pretty well. But that series means so much that what there is. I mean, you saw at the end of that Brisbane test that Archer, Smith, and Weatherald, and Stokes they were going at each other, even though Stokes and Smith get on pretty well. So. There'd be a bit of verbals, but I think that's probably par for the course.
Yeah. You mentioned Shane Warne involved in that series. For instance, what made him? Is he a genius? Is he that good? Is it that amazing? Yeah.
Yeah. He's 100% a
so
genius.
When you're watching him go about his business across those 2 months, what is it about what he's doing that sets him apart from so many?
Well, he bowls leg spin, which is the hardest art to bowl because the way the ball is released, it's very hard to be consistent. So he had an amazing control over the ball. He had lots of different deliveries. If you bowl leg spin well, you've got a googly, you've got a flipper, and things like that. I'm not expecting people to know what those things are, but they're basically disguised deliveries that look like his normal ball, but actually don't behave in that way. So you've got to be very, very good at trying to pick that and also play it. So
and he disguised them.
Yeah, he disguised them brilliantly, but he was also he had an unbelievable presence. You know, he's just
The hair,
it'd be
the
like
vibe, yeah.
it'd be like playing against Ronaldo. You're almost looking at him going, should I come near him? You know, he just had and he had an amazing way of working out batters. You know, he would bowl very differently. Say if he was bowling at Andrew Strauss or Kevin Peterson or myself, you know, it would be, you know, this is their strength. This is what I'm going to do, and he was able to do it. I think that's the thing, working someone out and then actually being able to deliver that, doing something that's an incredibly difficult art.
Would he work you out in advance, looking at tape, or would he?
Possibly, but possibly on the day as well. You look at the pitch conditions. You know, he'd look at what's happening on the day and then adapt to that. So you know, he had everything, unbelievable skill, and he was an absolute messer of a human being. You know, I mean, he could be out till all hours, and then when it came to actually performing, he was incredible.
I presume, you know, God given to an extent, but he must have been a ferocious worker to develop that repertoire, or was he just, I don't even have to train that hard, I just have it?
Nah, he definitely would have had to train an enormous amount. So he worked with a guy called Terry Jenner, who was a very famous leg spin bowling coach over there, and you know, he would have done an enormous amount of work in his teens and early 20s and stuff like that. And then once he got to a certain level, it's a bit about maintenance and stuff. So you know, anyone who bowls as many overs as he does, your shoulder ends up getting a bit rusty, to put it mildly. So he ended up not being able to bowl some of the deliveries he used to be able to bowl, but then he just you know, became more wily. You know, he did things in a different way. So yeah, absolutely a genius in terms of sporting terms.
Right. Okay. Let's talk Irish cricket. Get your sense of where things are. So you stepped down as the coach of the women's setup this year after 19 to 25, 6 years, give or take.
Yep.
Just felt it was the right time. 6 years, a long time, a lot of travel, family commitments, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, listen, I absolutely love the role with the women's team, and you know, I'd love to do it again in the future. You know, it's a very young team. You know, there's a lot of talent there. I just felt after 6 years, it was, you know, 6 years is a good stint for a head coach anyway. It's pretty full on in terms of the amount of players we were trying to coach and bring through and stuff like that. You know. I would say the sort of structures beneath the senior team possibly, you know, really aren't there. So, you know, we would try and identify younger girls and bring them into the squad to try and give them the coaching and support that they need to become international cricketers, you know. So there's a big sort of gap between that youth and the senior team.
You're trying to bridge it. How big is the management team?
So it was myself and another, it was myself at the start, and I had a part-time assistant coach, but we did get backed quite a lot by Cricket Ireland after a while. There's a lot of credit to go there. So we had 2 full-time coaches alongside myself, and then we had a full-time physio, full-time S&C, full-time manager. So we actually had 6 in the end, which is pretty good for our sport.
Because the men's and women's teams are now professional.
Yep.
The players are paid.
Yep.
And is that real professionalism, or is it, you know, sometimes rugby sevens, the wages are so small, they're working on the side. What kind of professionalism do we have these days?
No, yeah, they're pretty good. So the top female players are earning pretty well. I don't know the exact numbers. I don't know the exact numbers, but they earn a good wage.
Living wage.
A living wage. Yeah, they earn a living wage, and they can certainly live off it. Whether they could buy property in Dublin, I don't know. I doubt that. And the guys were professional beforehand. So like a lot of these things, to try and get the parity there just isn't fiscally possible for Cricket Ireland, but they're trying to, you know, bridge that gap every year, and they are doing a pretty good job of that. So the guys are paid, the top players are paid a bit more than the female players. But as I said, hopefully over the next few years, that gap is bridged. So yeah, they're full-time cricketers. As I said, the top players are, you know, we've got 2 or 3 girls now, women who go to England and play the domestic competition there as overseas players. So I think that shows you that they're really valued. Gabby Lewis is the captain, got a big 100 in the final of the 50 over competition last year. So, and won woman of the match. So. So she's doing really well. Orla Prendergast is probably the best known player. She's played the Big Bash in Australia and played a lot in England as well, and consistently does very well for Ireland. So there's a lot of talent.
And what's the general route for a cricketer in Ireland, male or female? I don't suspect it's played much at schools. Is it generally you just find your
club? Yeah.
And is the club very like pockets, the same areas?
Yeah, it's very much so. The club's stuff hasn't changed a huge amount. My own club, Marion, has a good junior pathway. I hate that word pathway, but has a lot of kids there, and the girls and boys. So take it pretty seriously. So it's mainly clubs. Some of the schools do play, especially on the boys' side. My own boys are at CUS and they take the cricket reasonably seriously. But it's a very short season. They play for 4 to 6 weeks, close to the summer term, so they don't really play. So it's really a club game. And so from the women's point of view, or girls as it is, often when we bring them into the squad, it's about identifying who we feel has the ability and talent to go on, and almost pulling them out of.
Yes.
They would do under 19, under 17. They play lots of games and stuff like that. But if we felt like someone was could be a top player in 3 or 4 years, it was about trying to give them support as early as possible.
And what are the pockets? North Dublin has a reputation.
Yep.
South Dublin.
So you have sort of Skerries, Rush, Lusk, Balbriggan, Balrudry, those kind of places.
It's cricket country.
That's cricket country. Yeah. So that's great. And then you have your Sandymount area. We've obviously YMCA is now gone as a club, which is devastating to a sport like ours, which obviously isn't the biggest in this country. But Marion and Pembroke and Railway Union down in Sandymount, and then there's obviously clubs. Clontarf's a big club. Malahide got a big club there as well. So it definitely has pockets.
The rest of the country?
The rest of the country, the northwest of Ireland, again, it's a village game up there. So it's very popular in some of the smaller villages around Derry. To be almost the game, and then Belfast to be very similar to Dublin in terms of some clubs. A reasonable amount of clubs. Where there is a Munster Cricket Union and a Connacht Cricket Union, but they're a little bit behind the other three.
Okay. So it really is small numbers and trying to cherry pick. So it's kind of remarkable then, really, that like Ireland is, of the 108, I think, countries in the world that have cricket teams.
Yep.
Is it 17 are full members of the ICC?
No, only 12.
12.
Only 12.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
12.
we're
So
one of the 12. Yeah.
for Ireland to be one of 12 with those numbers,
Yeah.
is a big achievement.
It's an incredible achievement, and it was based on. It was based on access to county cricket in England. So when we weren't full members of the ICC, which would be, if anyone who's a rugby fan, it'd be sort of similar to being a top tier nation in rugby. If you're Romania or someone like that, you're not in the Six Nations. Very hard to sort of push on.
And I'm right, so you don't play test matches unless you're full member, is that right?
Correct, correct. So that's that was always the way forward. Now they're trying to get rid of that test match necessity because hosting test matches is very, very expensive. But what I was going to say was, before we were full members of the ICC, Irish players were allowed to go and play in England as domestic players. So I went over, for instance, in 99, 2000 and played it as a domestic player, not as an English player, but just as I wasn't an overseas player. And each team was allowed one, and sometimes they allowed two. It depends on what English cricket wants to do at the time. But so we weren't. So there was no. They weren't hiring me to go over and be the overseas player, which would be, usually one of the better players in the world, Australian or Pakistani or something like that.
So you as an Irishman didn't take up that spot?
No, I didn't take up that spot. So I went over and I could play all the games, get all, and it ended up, people like Owen Morgan and Boyd Rankin and guys who went on, but there was lots of us there. William Porterfield, who was captain for a long time, Niall O'Brien, Kevin O'Brien, Gary Wilson.
That brings up your standards.
Yeah, well, it's equivalent again to the footballers. You play for, with all due respect to League of Ireland, you play for Shamrock Rovers, you play for Brentford, who, in the Premier League. It's chalk and cheese. You learn the game, you play constantly, you're around other top players, you meet these overseas players, and you improve out of sight. That wasn't really the case on the women's side, because women's cricket in England isn't where it is now. We actually have more women playing cricket in England now as overseas players, because they have a domestic structure. So it's actually beneficial to the women's team. But the men's team, unless one of the teams, gets Harry Tector or Andy Balbirnie or someone like that, or Paul Sterling to go and play as an overseas player, they don't get that access to that. So we're reliant on our own domestic system to bring through those talents. So we've done pretty well considering that.
To get a broad temperature check on the state of the game then here at that elite level, let me throw a few broad things at you and you pick up wherever you see fit. So people will have seen Sarah Keane, who has a huge reputation, has been appointed as chief executive. She's going to take over in March of 26. She takes over from Warren Dootram, who's been there for 20 odd years. So Sarah Keane seems to have an incredible pedigree. Everywhere she's gone, she has improved things. So you would put that down from this remove as a positive, I think. the broader landscape. Cricket's going to go to the LA Games in 2028. That's very exciting. T20 format. There has been a problem with a lack of cricket in Ireland. So last year, for instance, Cricket Ireland had to call off a tour by Australia, and then Afghanistan's tour this summer called off, and they cited just the cost, because there is no permanent stadium. So the cost of transforming club grounds into international venues is a lot. And so just calling off these visits it's a disaster. I mean, it makes Ireland look like a minnow. That said, in 2030, Ireland is due to co-host the T20 World Cup in 2030. And so as part of that with England and Scotland, the government effectively are funding a stadium, and that's going to be at Abbotstown. So I saw Warren Doutram say, as he was leaving, I've always felt the lack of a permanent stadium infrastructure marked us out as a minnow sport in Ireland. We're now going to be able to say, this is us, this is our home. So that seems very positive. On the downside, Ireland haven't qualified for the Cricket World Cup in 19 or 23. And funding seems to be not bad. Like the ICC, in fairness to them, took Irish funding from 10 million relatively recently and stuck it up to 16 million. And the government are paying for a stadium. So, good and bad in there.
Yes.
Cricket in Ireland. That elite level.
Yeah, I think funding-wise for a smaller sport in Ireland, which undoubtedly cricket is, we get an enormous amount of funding from the the international ICC, which is the International Cricket Council. So relatively speaking, we're a very rich sport for the size we are in the country. There's several sports that have more participants than we do, no matter what someone says about who's picked up a cricket bat, because you can always, numbers of players can always be finagled. So relatively speaking, we have a lot of money. I think the frustration from cricket lovers in Ireland is when we call off stuff and plead, pauper. We have far more money now than we ever did, and we played more cricket before. So it's a hard one to get your head around. Hosting test matches is very, very expensive. 5 days. You need certain broadcast things to be in place, and they're very expensive. And I think the cost of everything in Ireland is just really, really, really high. So, relatively speaking, if you're in Zimbabwe and you want to host something, it's just far cheaper to host, because of the cost of labour, the cost of anything, so
insurance, you name it,
everything.
Yeah.
So it's an incredibly expensive place to do anything. And I like the stadium, which is going to be up in Abbotstown at the National Sports Campus there, has had a bit of stick because of the location, but I can't see how we could have had a different location. Where would we get the land? How would we, how would we have government backing and things like that? And the negativity around that is about how to get to it, and it's it's going to be soulless, and it's it's not a club ground or Malahide. People love Malahide because it's in a village, and I love it too.
Yeah.
It's just walk down to the road and go to Gibney's and all that kind of stuff.
But it's nice because I'm not a million miles away from Clontarf, and at times you saunter up of a summer's evening.
100%.
It's very atmospheric.
It is, yeah. It's a lovely place to watch, but it's not a stadium.
One of the things people like about cricket, the atmosphere.
Yeah, but it
needs must.
Needs must. You need a base. I mean, as head coach of the women's team for quite a long time, it's very frustrating. We're begging and stealing. We were trained indoors. For instance, the girls are away in South Africa playing a series at the moment, and they had 2 months of training indoors in not great facilities. But it's no way of preparing yourself to go and play in South Africa. Whereas if you have your own stadium, you might have your own indoor centre, which you can bespoke to your needs, and also have lights that you can train outdoors. Who cares if it's cold, Yeah. So
what capacity is it due to be?
Good question. I think it's small with the ability to make it bigger if you need to be. So I think it's around 6,000 or 7,000. I might be getting those numbers wrong with the sort of ability to go up into the sort of low 5 figures.
That's smart. You're better off having full small than.
Well, I think so. So the
big.
people, again, with our growing South Asian population, some people are thinking, maybe we should have been a bit more. Ambitious, optimistic, and stuff like that. But I think they probably got it right, and that's that'd be what my take would be. And I think, as I said, the venue up there is really the only place you can get the land and the backing and stuff like that. So I think that's going to be a positive. That has I think the initial stages of that have got past our facilities. The head of facilities has just left to be the Hockey Ireland CEO, so there's a bit of change there. So interested to see who comes into that role. You mentioned about Sarah Keane. I obviously don't know Sarah Keane, but she has an amazing reputation. Hopefully she comes in, hits the ground running, and there are always issues with any sporting body, and hopefully she can fix a lot of those. But there's a lot of good stuff there as well. There's funding isn't an issue. There's a board of directors there who seem pretty keen on making things work. Some impressive people on there, and there's a lot of enthusiasm among the players to push on and try and get up those rankings.
Yeah. So how is the men's team doing? There's a T20 World Cup in February in Sri Lanka. Ireland of Sri Lanka. I mean, that'll be an occasion. Sri Lanka, Australia, Zimbabwe, and Oman in their group. I mentioned they haven't qualified for the Cricket World Cup in 19 or 23 after such a rich run.
Yeah.
People remember 07 and 11 and 15 in particular. So where are we as men's team at the moment?
So, just to be clear, when you say World Cup, it's the 50 over World Cup, which people say is the World Cup, and then there's T20 World Cups in between those, which is very confusing for non-cricket people. Yeah. But the 50 over World Cup is very hard to qualify for because there's only 10 teams. So there's only 10 teams, not the last two of them. So, you've really got to be on your mettle, and we're sort of ranked around that 11, 12. So
have we always kind of hovered around there?
Yeah, we've got up to 10, 9. Before. But consistently to get up to your 8s and 7s and 6s, you need to be winning series against teams above you.
Is that realistic for us? Like if you take rugby, for instance, that top 7, 8, 9. It was always thus. It feels like it's very hard to penetrate that.
It is. It's really hard because rugby is very similar to cricket in some ways, but then cricket's very unusual as well because, the wealth is distributed very unevenly. So India, Australia, England, definitely the three strongest countries. They also take an enormous percentage of the pie. So I said Ireland is relatively wealthy, but compared to them, there's an enormous amount of money in cricket. It's absolutely huge. Yeah. So what ends up happening is those teams get stronger and stronger and stronger, and everyone else gets left behind, and they're playing more and more against each other. So England, Australia, India, maybe South Africa, maybe New Zealand, a few other teams are playing each other tons and tons and tons.
Self-perpetuating.
So they get better and better and better, and it's harder for the young. But the one thing I would say is that the associate teams, which we used to be one of, i.e. the non-full members, are getting better. So the teams from 24 to 12 are actually, you use rugby as an example, the teams from 24 to 12 are actually very competitive, and they would give Ireland a very, very good game, whereas the team is 24th in the world in rugby wouldn't give, I know there's 24 teams in the World Cup, but there's some bad groups in that World Cup, So
it's wrong to me to look at it from afar and say, well, they didn't qualify for those two World Cups, they must not be doing particularly well.
No, yeah. I mean, the T20 World Cup would be a better gauge of where the team is at because we're better at that format. We play more of it. Our players are probably more suited to that. And also, as I said, teams like Oman, everyone will look at Oman, are they any good? But they're actually a good team. They beat us in one of the, they've beaten us recently. Zimbabwe are a good team in that. So, if we manage to get through that group or get a couple of wins, that's actually a pretty good effort. So that'll be a good gauge where the team's at. And, the women's team are the same. The Women's World Cup is going from is 8 teams in the 50 over World Cup, which we didn't qualify for the last one, but it's going to 10 teams, and we're ranked sort of around 9th, so we should get through on the women's side in the next version of that, which would be amazing for our game because it'll push on. There's obviously no real test matches in women's cricket. We have no yearning to play women's test matches, so that's the women's side.
Yeah, and so Ireland have played 12 test matches and won 3 of them. So in March 24 against Afghanistan, there was Zimbabwe in July 24, and then another in February this year. Is that still, in the eyes of the players, in the eyes of Irish cricket fans, is that still the ultimate thing? Like, winning test matches is the most exciting part of any year? Or will, say next year, the T20 World Cup, would big wins over Sri Lanka, a big day there trump in a test match, we beat New Zealand? What is the pinnacle these days in the sport? Because I find it's hard to decipher what to be excited about sometimes.
Yeah, the formats are very hard. And the T10's coming in now is even shorter than T20, so it's quite hard to keep an eye on. And obviously England has the 100, which is a completely different format of the cricket. So it is hard to keep an eye on it. The players would still say that a test match is special. it's hard to describe to someone who's not a cricket fan massively, but is listening to this. But it's just different. Winning a game over, we tend to play for test matches over 4 days, by the way, and this is one of the things that's come in because of T20. The scoring rates are higher and stuff like that. But winning a test match, spending 4 days at something. It's just, and the ebbs and flows of it, the ups and downs. This is one of the things about watching it. It is a slow burn, but if you know what's going on, you can sort of live those ups and downs, and something can happen, and one individual can change the game, and then it can change back. And obviously, conditions are changing constantly because you're playing over 4 days. It might rain for 10 minutes, and that changes the pitch, and then it might be sunny for another day and a half, and that might change things as well. So
it's a complete test.
It's a real test, and it's a test of skill, it's a test of patience, it's a massive test of fitness and strength and things like that. And then there's the physical element, which obviously a lot of people don't know in cricket as well. I mean, in a test match, someone can just keep ball and bounces at your head, so you've got to get through that, and a fast ball or ball and bounces at your head is not particularly pleasant. So, there's a test of your mettle as well. So, that's. The guys who won those test matches, because Ireland won before this test series in Bangladesh, which we lost 2-0 but played okay in, they'd won the previous 3 test matches. And for Ireland, that's incredible. And it's even more incredible because we don't even play any red ball cricket. The men don't play any red ball cricket in Ireland at the moment domestically. So again, that'd be akin to the rugby team playing only sevens and then going and playing the Six Nations as a 15-a-side team and expecting the team to do well. So, there's a lot to be proud of with the team there, but there's also a lot structurally that Cricket Ireland need to get better. But in answer to your question, I would still say a Test match is pretty special. But if they get through in a T20 World Cup, that would be even more special.
It would. Okay.
I think it would.
Yeah.
I think if they got through to the round, beat Sri Lanka, beat Oman, beat Zimbabwe, got through to the next round, that would be one that you remember.
Okay. Well, that's in February in Sri Lanka.
But I also think that would capture the public's imagination. That's a big one. I mean, Test matches are great.
Yeah.
Test matches are great. Maybe a Test match against Australia might garner interest here, but with all due respect to Zimbabwe and Afghanistan, Ireland beating them, which is an incredible achievement for the team, doesn't get that interest from people here. It doesn't get the eyeballs, and I think we've lost a bit of that in cricket for the last year or two. There hasn't been many days where people have gone, the cricket's on, what's going on, it's been on the telly or something like that. And that used to happen a bit more.
Yeah, it punctured through. It was one of those sports that something big has happened.
Yeah, everyone would go, "Oh, that's interesting," and we'll follow that for a bit. We know who the players are and stuff, and we've lost a bit of it.
Do I see it? Because they publish the Test match fixtures like years in advance. So am I right in saying T20 World Cup next year in Sri Lanka in February, and then in May, Ireland New Zealand Test in Ireland.
Yeah.
And in July, South Africa in Ireland, 3 one-day internationals, 3 T20s.
In theory. So all this stuff is in theory because they can change. I mean, you mentioned the Australia series. I mean, that was in the diary until it was cancelled.
Okay.
So,
that's kind of insane that's happening in international sport.
It's absolutely insane. Yeah. It's absolutely insane. It's also insane that you would cancel a series against one of the best teams in the world. I mean, Australia coming to our shores, you would have thought that was an easy sell. So, and for us to go, we can't afford that. It means we are not selling the TV rights where we don't think we're going to fill the stadiums or whatever we build. So that's not good. So that's not great. I'd be very hopeful of playing New Zealand in a Test match here. That will be a really good occasion wherever it gets played. And that's something I would want to go to. I want to go and watch that. As opposed to just watching on telly or something like that.
Yeah.
So that would be cool. And the T20 World Cup will be brilliant. It's a great venue to play that in Sri Lanka.
Okay. Just the last one then. A word on your career, how you reflect on it all. You mentioned going over to Middlesex when you were kind of late teens, debut in 21 at 99, and then hooked up with England courtesy of the residency rule, experienced the Ashes, which is an amazing thing, and a World Cup with England. Interestingly, I read you made your England one-day international debut, of course. Is this cruelty or what's the story here? Your one-day England international debut was in June 2006 against Ireland. The team included your younger brother Dominic.
Yeah.
Who'd your folks support in that one?
Yeah, they were there. Yeah.
And then 07 World Cup with England, where you beat Ireland. But then, when things weren't necessarily continuing to happen with England, you were back with Ireland and played in the 2011 World Cup, the 15 World Cup, famous wins, England, West Indies, and then. At 39 years old, you hung on because Ireland had been awarded full member test status in 17, and so Ireland's first ever test was against Pakistan in May 2018. There's a great photo of
Yep.
teams together afterwards, and you were first to bat the first run for Ireland, if anyone wants the quiz question,
Yeah.
in Test match cricket history, and retired a week later.
Yeah.
Almost a.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that a at 39? I want to play Test match cricket for Ireland. I'm hanging on no matter what.
Yeah, you said hung on. It was clung on. I think
Okay.
was probably the right phrase. You know, very dodgy hip at that point. So there was a few anti-inflammatories taken there. You know,
I mean, a lot of cricketers.
yeah.
Cricket is sneaky as an aside for injuries.
Yeah, it's
They're all
terrible.
bashed up.
Well, it's a very one-sided game in terms of being a batter. You know, you spend your life in a crouch position. You know, looking in a certain way. So my neck isn't in great nick either. But from a bowler's point of view, I mean, there's nothing worse. You're guaranteed to get injured as a bowler.
Your shoulders just won't survive.
It's back mainly
Is it
back.
really?
Yeah, back, hips, things like that because of the forces going through there. So,
Okay.
but your shoulders as well, knees,
Everything.
everything. Yeah. So Mark Wood is out of this series now. He bowls 90 mile an hour, puts his life and soul into it, but his body's telling him now that he can't play this Ashes series. That is so. Yeah, clung on, played that Test match. It was an amazing occasion. You always have regrets that we didn't, because we had a good opportunity to do better in that game than we ended up doing. You know, they were a very vulnerable team at the time, Pakistan. So, and we even had a chance to win it at the end, apart from a few missed opportunities. So, but I loved the occasion. I loved playing that. Made my debut for England against Ireland. I hated that game, I have to admit. Absolutely would have loved to have played against anyone else.
Was there much? Because I think we don't need to explain why. Morgan, yourself, others pursue the England line.
Yeah.
Ireland not a test nation. You want to reach the pinnacle.
Yeah.
Was there much then kind of you're playing for England? What? Or
a bit of that, yeah. I mean, listen, you're a professional, so I mean, there's no professional route for playing cricket in Ireland. So you went to play county cricket, and the natural progression is to, you're over in England. And with all due respect to Ireland at the time, yes, we did play cricket, but it was Mickey Mouse stuff, really. Until the team qualified for that World Cup in 2007. By the way, which I was part of the team that qualified for. So I played for Ireland in 2005 when we qualified for 2007, and it just so happened in that intervening period, obviously got my opportunity for England, which should have been an amazing, and it was most of my England career, which wasn't very long, but I loved it, but I hated the game. I played twice against Ireland, once in the World Cup and once as a debut, and I hated those games.
Explain more.
Well, because I'm Irish, I didn't want to play against Austria. If I'm playing for England, if I'm playing for a different team, I don't want to play against Ireland, and I,
to the extent, did it make
it's hard to explain. It's hard to.
No, I get it. But to the extent that did it make you rethink? What have I done here?
Maybe a bit of that, but the rest of the games I didn't feel like that at all. So so being with England at the Ashes, after that, I had an amazing experience over there. Even though England obviously lost 5-0, but I played the whole one-day series after that. Traditionally, the Ashes happened in Australia, and then you played a tri-series after it. So you'd spend 3 or 4 months away, which is what we did.
You did very well in one of those.
And we won the tri-series against Australia and New Zealand, who were.
And you personally did well.
And I did well as well. So I had a really good series. We won. And it was an incredible achievement. But then we came home. We were away for 3 or 4 months, and we came 3.5 months. Came home for 4 days. Then went to the World Cup in West Indies for another month, and so it was hectic. So the team were absolutely cooked.
It's no wonder there's mental health issues in.
It's tricky.
And did then coming home and playing in the green. And
people, by the way, people saying I've gone to Australia and West Indies for 4 or 5 months won't be thinking you've got mental health issues, but it is.
You go sit in a hotel room for 4 or 5
months.
months.
Yeah.
And when you're then playing for Ireland,
does
that feel so much more comfortable, better? Are you more emotional in a positive way? Is it different?
Being honest, yes. So I want to clarify this by saying I had an amazing time playing for England, and I never felt anything other than love from England fans and stuff when I played, and from the team and stuff like that. And the England cricket team has a history of South Africans and Australians and people from West Indians playing for the team. Obviously, it's a country which has a lot of people immigrating to it. So just to clarify that, I love playing for England, but I definitely preferred playing for Ireland. I would have loved if Ireland had for instance, I would give an example now of someone probably the best young batter in Ireland is Harry Tector. For him to go, if he went to England now and played for England, that would be very strange, because he can have a very good career playing for Ireland and get paid pretty well. Sorry, I don't mean to speak for him. If you can do whatever you like, but it wouldn't make as much sense as it did back then. But again, you explain that to Irish people who don't know cricket. It's a very
Yeah.
hard one to explain to them. But yes, it felt easier playing for Ireland. The good days were great, you know, and I was very glad to be back playing in 2011. You know, I got special dispensation for that because it wasn't quite 4 years after
Yes.
2007 when I'd been playing for England, but. Yeah, that was a great World Cup in India.
Yeah. 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 Without that Irish experience, it might have just
Yeah,
strained your career an
yeah,
itch, or what a pity I didn't
yeah,
get to do that with
yeah,
Ireland.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. So I guess when are you being a head coach somewhere? Would you coach county cricket? Are you looking for a job in Ireland, or do you know what you're going
Travel's
to do?
tough because, you know, I've got a young family
Yeah.
and my wife's work also takes her away a bit. So, you know, one of us got to be around. So, but I do I want to stick in coaching, and you know, there's not huge opportunities in Ireland unless you work for Cricket Ireland. So, you know, it probably would involve a bit of travel. But the way the world is set up with T20 franchise stuff and, you know, shorter competitions, it could work to go abroad, and I'd probably be looking to do that next year at some point.
Would you? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I presume, you know, it always shocks people when you look at like what's the most watched sporting event in a year, and cricket is up there for obvious reasons because
Yep.
it's so big in that part of the world.
Yeah.
All those? It's passed me by. I sometimes flick on Sky Sports and I
Yeah.
see teams in
Yeah.
colourful jerseys or whatever.
Yeah.
Has all that thing been a great success, and people love it and it's gone really well?
So the IPL is absolutely enormous. That's
Is
the
it?
Indian Premier League, absolutely enormous. So that's a country of, you know, 1.5 billion people, and, you know, absolutely cricket mad. So that's an enormous competition, and that goes usually March, April, around there. So that's their big T20 franchise competition. The ones in Australia, India, England do amazing, and Pakistan do amazingly. A lot of the other ones, and there are lots of them, so that's probably why you're seeing lots of them.
Okay.
For instance, there's one in Abu Dhabi, which has all the best players in the world. The guys get paid very, very well to play in that. Wouldn't have big crowds at it, but it has tons of people watching on TV.
Okay.
So it's, I mean, it's for, lots of these are for TV audiences, you know. But I have to, it's saturation point now. Like, I have zero interest is the wrong thing. I still watch it sometimes, but it's very hard to actually keep a track of what the team names and who's doing what and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The big one, an interesting one, is the MLC, which is Major League Cricket in the States, which I think there's 6 or 8 teams in that one, and that seems to be doing really well because obviously they have a huge diaspora from India, Pakistan, places like that. So that seems to be doing really well and seems to be the way into that market, you know. So interested to see where that goes.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, we sort of neglected cricket a bit on the podcast, so it's great to get you in and chat about all these things.
Thank you for having me.
No, pleasure. One of Ireland's very best, Ed Joyce. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks.